The Titanic is one of the most famous cruise ships in the world, except I lied, the Titanic is not a cruise ship. While this is often stated, the Titanic is actually an ocean liner, a type of ship that transformed the world and has changed the way we travel. You may have heard of this distinction before, but what actually is the difference? Why are cruise ships more popular? And what happened to ocean liners? Let's explore the rules of navigation. Ocean liners in their simplest form are transport, but let's get into the history of ocean liners before we talk about this. Back in the old days, no one really knew how to schedule voyages because sailing ships went with the wind. They were quite unpredictable, and while you could kind of predict them with the whole trade winds thing, they were relatively unpredictable though, and you couldn't really hand out a card saying when the next ship would arrive, because half the time it wouldn't. However, people did try to regularly schedule sailing voyages, with the Blackball line being the most successful, putting an emphasis on comfort rather than speed in 1818. But eventually, a ship came along that would change transportation forever: the SS Great Britain. Although the ship came with some sails, it mostly relied on its steam engine, and would do regularly scheduled service between the UK and Australia. However, eventually reduced to the UK and America. The SS Great Britain used early screw propellers, and a more reliable method of steam engines. They were finally able to have a regular, reliable service across the Atlantic with the sails never being used. With this, other companies took notice, notably Cunard with the SS Britannia, and in 1858, the SS Great Eastern was built, which would be the largest ship in the world by far and would hold that title for the next 50 years. But it was a miserable failure. It got stuck on launch, it exploded on its sea trials, and the next day its designer died. Then it served from London to New York, which was not its original intended route, before becoming a giant floating billboard for the rest of its life. Over the years, ships went from wood to iron to steel. Ships at this time also began phasing out sails. Ships like the White Star Liner Atlantic had sails and engines because back then people did not trust steam engines. The Cunard ships Umbria and Campania were the last ships to have backup sails, mostly. The famous Cunard ship Carpathia also had sails, but I bet you never knew that. By the way, the White Star Line at this time became a competitor with Cunard, a legendary rivalry that would set the scene of the ocean liner industry for the next few decades. Ocean liners became the main way of international travel, but despite being the most famous in the North Atlantic, that was not the only route. Ocean liners connected Europe with the entire world: South America, Canada, Africa, China, Hong Kong, and more. There was even a fleet started by Japan to focus on the Pacific, but the most famous of the alternate routes was to Australia, which was a very popular route and which many people in Australia can trace their ancestry to. Ocean liners became big symbols of national pride, and all of this came to a front when ocean liners accidentally started World War I. You see, in 1889, during the Royal Naval Review, the RMS Teutonic was partly turned into an auxiliary cruiser, and the Kaiser of Germany was touring it. Part of the interiors were still beautiful and fitted out. The Kaiser was so impressed that he declared that Germany must have its own beautiful ocean liner fleet to rival Britain. This started an ocean liner race between the White Star Line, the Cunard Line, the German ocean liner companies, and the French line, evolving into an arms race that contributed to, at least in part, to the beginning of World War I. In 1906, the Lusitania and Mauretania were built, becoming the fastest ships to cross the Atlantic, earning a trophy known as the Blue Riband that is awarded to the fastest ship across the Atlantic. As a response, the White Star Line built 3 ships that focused on comfort rather than speed: Olympic, Britannic, and Titanic. After the sinking of Titanic, regulations changed, and as such the design of ocean liners. Germany then built 3 ships which were the new largest ships in the world: Imperator, Vaterland, and Bismarck, all of which went to other lines after the war. In the 1920s, while ocean liners got larger and larger, becoming floating palaces. However, things would change in 1932 when the White Star Line was bought out by Cunard and slowly died, selling all their ships and ending the rivalry. Notable ships during this time were the Empress of Britain, which was the largest ever Canadian ocean liner, the Queen Mary, Normandy, which both fought over the first place for Blue Ribbon, Europa, and many more, represented this new era of ocean liners. However, another industry became more powerful during this time: cruising, and ocean liners began doing more of those, but we'll get to those later. During World War II, ocean liners were recruited for the war, and many did not make it out. In fact, the Aquitania was the only ocean liner to serve in both world wars. After World War II, planes got more advanced, and since they were faster, they became the preferred mode of transport. Still, into the late 60s, even though ocean liners like the Ile-de-France and Queen Mary were being retired, new ones were being built. Ships such as the Stockholm Mauretania II, Empress of Canada, and the SS United States, which was the fastest ship to cross the Atlantic in just under 3 days. She may have entered late, but was still popular. However, air travel really took off during this time, and ocean liners became a novelty, with some like the Empress of Canada and SS France becoming the SS Norway and Mardi Gras respectively. The Italian lines SS Michelangelo and SS Raffaello, launched in 1962 and 1963, were two of the last ocean liners to be built primarily for service across the North Atlantic. Despite all this, the route to Australia was still relatively popular, as planes could not reach the Australia from the UK yet, so old World War II ships continued to ply the waves to Australia. During the Falklands War, two of the last ocean liners, the Canberra and Queen Elizabeth II, were used in the war. In the 1970s, the number of ocean liners dropped below 10, and, after the Falklands War, planes were able to travel to Australia, and that route fizzled out and ended. At the turn of the century in the 2000s, the Canberra was scrapped, and the number of ocean liners went down to 1 as planes became reliable and faster. The Queen Elizabeth II was the only ocean liner serving, but in 2004, the Queen Mary II was built, and she became the last ocean liner to be built. To this day, she is the last serving ocean liner. The last surviving ocean liners are the Stockholm, which became a cruise ship and is now laid up, Rotterdam, which is a hotel, the SS United States, which is on borrowed time as she's set to be sunk soon as an artificial reef, ending the last American ocean liner, the MV Brasil Maru, which is a hotel in China, MV Funchal, which is the last Portuguese ocean liner and is now a cruise ship, MV Anserville, which is now a mall and hotel in China, Queen Mary, which is a museum and hotel, Queen Elizabeth II, which is a museum in Dubai, and Queen Mary II, which is still serving till this day. And that is the incredibly simplified history of ocean liners. But let's talk about cruise ships, because to understand the difference, you need to know both. Pleasure crafts have always been a thing, but the Princessin Victoria Louise was the first purpose-built cruise ship. These ships were used to take people to vacation destinations. However, that ship did not last long. In the 1920s, a new industry started: booze cruises. During this time, prohibition was in place, meaning alcohol was banned in the US. Ships like the Leviathan, which was the previously mentioned Vaterland, and the Titanic sister ship Olympic brought people to international waters to drink beer and chill for a few days. So basically, beer created the cruise industry, and in that regard, nothing has changed. During this time, other ships started traveling across the tropics, taking passengers to vacation destinations rather than for travel. After the war, with the advent of large passenger jet aircraft in the 1960s, intercontinental travelers switched from ships to planes, sending the ocean liner trade into a terminal decline. However, Most older ocean liners could not do cruising due to the small cabins, three-class layout, and deep draft preventing them from entering smaller ports. Around this time, the concept arose: get on a ship, then the ship would take you to multiple ports in the span of a few days. Once again, cruise ships were for taking you on vacation and to have fun. Ocean liners were for getting you somewhere. Meaning, cruise ships did not need to worry about speed or timing. During this time, ocean liners began to be converted into cruise ships, taking people out for a few days to multiple ports for fun and relaxation. However, cruising was still seen as a thing for elderly people and couples, not so much for kids. But everything changed when Premier Cruises attacked. They marketed to families with the help of Disney, and transformed the industry into a market that everyone could enjoy. This transformed the industry to a market everyone could enjoy, and over the years, cruise ships overtook ocean liners, and to allow more passengers, superstructures and more rooms were added to maximize profit, and eventually, these evolved into some of the largest ships in the world. And that's the incredibly simplified history of both ocean liners and cruise ships. So, how do you shorten this down? How do you make it so that you can tell this to anyone that you know that doesn't know this difference? And how do you bring it up in conversation? Well, the main difference is their purpose. Ocean liners are for getting somewhere from point A to point B. The ship is just the way of getting there. It's not to say that cruise ships are the destination. Cruise ships do also take you places, but ocean liners are for getting you somewhere you need to go, and cruise ships are for vacations. Put simply, ocean liners are like planes. You use them to get from place to place, or even to vacations, but they aren't the vacation themselves most of the time. The people that were on the Titanic were not on there for fun. They were traveling to America. Ocean liners also have lifeboats very high above the waterline. This is to avoid being damaged. Ocean liners need to go through rough water no matter what to keep up their schedule, so their design is often very suited to go through storms. But cruise ships can just avoid the storm. Cruise ships delay arrivals all the time. On my first cruise, they literally delayed the arrival into Half Moon Cay and then cancelled it altogether, and there was not much of a fuss. Ocean liners also have less balconies, and a long stately bow. Cruise ships put the lifeboats low to make room for things on the upper deck, like pools, chairs, roller coasters, and more. And short bows so that the lines can fit more rooms. This is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and it's something that I talk about lots with people whenever they say the Titanic is a cruise ship. Anyways, thanks for watching this Rules of Navigation video. And for the 8-year anniversary of my channel, on December 16th, I will be doing a Q&A, so ask away. Anyways, after that, I will be taking a break for December to work on a longer video. Anyways, thanks for watching. Fair winds and following seas.